Every creative individual wants to see their fans devour their work, wants to see their reactions, wants to market themselves for their crowd, and better tailor their works in order to increase that market. The late 1980s and the early 90s was a period in time in the American comics industry that was very much focused on this fact. A bit too much, in fact. In 1986, the owner of Heroes World would sell Marvel Comics to Ron Perlman. This started the Gimmick Age. Under the new ownership, Marvel would start an aggressive marketing campaign to sell more comics with huge storylines that would cross over into other titles, forcing readers to buy many. If they wanted to read the story, they would need to buy all of them. It would use gimmicks like holographic covers, glow-in-the-dark, extended out into a poster, and many other different things. A lot of promotional items were offered with comics. Heroes would die for periods of time and then be brought back to life. Heroes would turn into villains, and villains into heroes. Marvel started this trend, but shortly after, all the other companies started doing the same thing. Even though many fans rejected and grew tired of these gimmicks, companies still use them to draw revenue from new readers. And to this day, it still continues to some extent, though not nearly as badly as during this period. In 1988, another Batman storyline made comic history. This one was titled A Death in the Family. In this issue, the second character known as Robin was killed. The book is important because, unlike most stories in comic book history, the fans decided the fate of Robin. DC called a vote and asked readers to write in. The vote was 5,343 to 5,271. A mere 72 votes, killing off the Boy Wonder. Later, another character would be created to fill the role of Robin once again. And the character that was supposedly killed off would resurface again to become a new anti-hero known as the Red Hood. In 1989, the Batman movie came out, a huge hit. The movie would boost comic book sales to new popularity that hadn't been seen since the Marvel Age. It wasn't just that the movie made comics popular again, it was also drawing in older readers again. Collecting comics was usually seen as a childish thing, something that teenagers and adults, especially the elderly, shouldn't be doing. However, as a resurgence of this nostalgia for older works, fans started trying to gather up all those old issues that they used to have that reminded them of the better times. Comics became more adult-oriented. They dealt with more mature issues while keeping the comics fun without going too entirely jokey and corny as they had done a long time ago. This resulted in a shift in the age of comic collectors. Those who read as a kid still kept reading them and returned to reading them, but the majority of comics moved towards teenage years and toward adult years in the case of some more mature comics, especially when it came to violence and language. About 30% of the customer base was over 20 years old. Now that base has increased, but primarily most comics are still read by children and teenagers. In addition, there's also the speculator market, comprised of people who bought several copies of a certain comic book issue with the intent to resell them later at a much higher price, if the demand was higher than the stores could satisfy. It could be a huge factor in the entire comic market's future success and downfall, and some individuals did make quite a lot of money off of it. Also in 1989, Sandman #1 came out. Created by Neil Gaiman, the main character Morpheus, also known as the Sandman, was a supernatural being with powers, not really a hero, but instead a deity that was the god of dreams. The title was meant for mature readers and was a flagship of DC's Vertigo line, which is still successful today. He won several awards for his work in the book, and it continued until 1996 with issue 75. It was done at the writer's request, not because of poor sales, because he had finished the story, something which hasn't really been dealt with in traditional comic publishing through most series. Actually finishing the story, telling one compact epic in that nature, broke the mold for a lot of different things, and it is a true literary classic. Today, Sandman is still being reprinted, and trade paperbacks are being sought after by people who couldn't collect the original series, and director's cuts and all sorts of other versions of it. Neil Gaiman has moved on to other works and still remained very popular in the comic book industry. In 1990, Todd McFarlane got his own Spider-Man title to draw and write. The result was Spider-Man #1, which became the best-selling comic book of that year. it wasn't just simply that Todd McFarlane was a very popular artist, but also it had multiple different copies of that cover. A lot of fans went out and bought the same comic more than once to collect these different covers, and the speculator market was in a frenzy over grabbing up as many different versions to resell at a later date. There were 9 different versions of this issue, some bagged, some in a different color, some were second print, and there was even a platinum version. In 1991, Marvel would repeat the success and give artist Rob Liefeld his own book to draw and plot. The book was called X-Force No. 1. Like Spider-Man No. 1, the book had gimmicks that would cause fans to buy multiple issues at the same time. Different issues had different cards of the characters inside, and there were generally 7 different versions of each issue. 5 came with different cards, while others without a polybag wrapping or with a second print of the comic. Later the same year, X-Men No. 1, written by Chris Claremont and artist Jim Lee, would come out, once again using a gimmick to ensure repeated sales, with 5 different covers, 4 of them making up one big cover picture, and the 5th would have the whole picture in one gatefold cover. It would sell over 8 million issues and remains the best-selling comic book to date. In 1992, Man of Steel died. Well, for a while. In Superman number 75, he was killed by Doomsday, a supervillain whose origins have been muddled and murky over the various revisions and reboots of the DC Universe, but regardless, he drove Superman to a level that no one had ever seen before. This event even got into national media. Mourners around the world gathered for Superman. 7 issues later, however, Superman came back, and DC sold even more comics. In Alpha Flight number 106, the first mainstream gay superhero arrived, or came out of the closet. North Star was part of Alpha Flight, the Canadian team of superheroes. The media attention that he received caused demand for the book to go up, caused a bit of controversy as could be expected. That's it for this week. Check back in 2 weeks for more tech comics, and I'll catch you on the flip side.